Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I am so happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the privilege and the honor to join you.
I appreciate it.
And to hear about the First Eight, this extraordinary book. I got a call from the great Congressman Jim Clyburn on this past Friday evening, about 10:39 p.m. and asked me to step in, and I can't tell you how excited I was at the time, because I've been talking about this book for quite a while.
Yeah.
Ever since I heard you talking about it.
Right.
And I was excited, and so you put me in touch with a woman who you mentioned at the end, which was very kind and demonstrative of your character in celebrating those that have helped you along the way, and that was Hope Derrick.
Yeah.
And Hope Derrick reached out, and we put it together. We jumped into action, and I said, Hope, I can't tell you how honored I am and privileged I am to be able to talk to the chairman about this great book, The First Eight, a personal history of the pioneering Black congressman who shaped a nation. I said, in order to do this, I've got to read it.
Yeah.
And the draft copy that was sent to me was 304 pages. I finished it today on my ride down here. So I'm very happy that I got through it.
Thank you.
What an extraordinary, masterful piece of reading that this is. I'm so excited to be here with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how we ended up here today and how you came upon putting this book together.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Tim, for stepping in at the last minute. I knew I could count on you to be here, simply because I think you owed me one or two.
At least.
Yeah. I got to know Tim really after he got elected. Well, maybe before. I invested in his campaign a little bit. But one of the things that I found kind of intriguing about this is the fact that he is really celebrated by the members of the Lane-wearing AME Church in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of AMEs in here tonight. And those two people are talked about a lot by me when I talk about history. Mm-hmm. This book came to life one day just after I wrote my memoir, which was published back 10 years ago. I was sitting in my conference room with a group of people, and they asked me about these 8 pictures on my wall. And when I explained to them who these 8 people were, one of them said, my goodness, I thought you were the first African-American from South Carolina to serve in Congress. And I kind of playfully said, oh no, before I was first, there were 8. Mm-hmm. And later on that day, I said to the staff, I said, my next book, I think, is going to be about these 8 people, because they are very, very important to the country, but most people know very little about them. A lot of people know about Robert Smalls, one of the 8, but the others, people didn't know a whole lot about. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing this book, just taking notes and setting things aside. And then came the election of 2020. Mm. And just after that election, I saw things happening. Phone calls being made down to Georgia, find me 11,000 some odd votes. People up in Michigan banging on the election commission's door, trying to set up a separate set, an alternative set of electors. Same thing in Pennsylvania. And I said to myself, hey, this book can't just be about the history of these people. I've got to tell the story of how these people got elected and why. Mm-hmm. There are 95 years between number 8 and yours truly, number 9. So this book is about their lives as congresspeople and as professionals, and that 95-year gap, and why it is that for 95 years, no African American got elected to Congress from South Carolina. And it may be interesting to all of you to know that in the 1870s, South Carolina was allocated 5 congresspeople in the House. 4 of the 5 were African Americans. And so that's what this book is about. Because I think that what I saw taking place in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and other places, trying to set up these alternative electors, I thought that people need to know that this was patterned after an event that took place back in 1876. And it was successful then. The question is, have we learned from that history? You can't learn from it if you don't know it. And so I wanted to write something that people could read, internalize, and hopefully say, I'm not going to let this happen again. That's where
No doubt. So this book, you're a teacher.
Right.
And this book taught me a lot, I can tell you right now. And I know that anyone that reads this will learn an awful lot about the history of not just the first 8, but the history of our nation, the history of South Carolina and its impact on the nation. The book begins in the Civil War period, during the Civil War, with Abraham Lincoln. Why don't you take us back and tell us, let's get into the first 8. I think it's important that folks know. And I had the privilege of reading this, so I can't wait for you all to get to know these amazing American heroes that were the first 8. Why don't you?
Well, everybody knows that Abraham Lincoln wrote 2 Emancipation Proclamations. Maybe not everybody, but he did write 2. The first one freed all of the enslaved people in Washington, D.C., and that became effective in 1862. He wrote a second one and kept it on his desk until September of 1862, and he signed it and made it effective January 1, 1863, freeing all of the enslaved people in those slave states that still remain in slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, when that happened, the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation, the first public reading of it, took place in Beaufort, South Carolina. And that is where this book really starts. It goes through the Civil War. During the Civil War, 3 of these people were enslaved. All of them were not enslaved. We had Richard Kane, for instance, who was an AME minister, pastored here at Bridge Street, AME Church over in, I think, Brooklyn at the time. It's changed places maybe 2 or 3 times. After pastoring here, he was sent down to Charleston to rebuild Emmanuel AME Church, the church that has come into focus recently because of those 8 souls that lost their lives there. So Richard Kane was a connection. Joseph Rennie was the first one elected and sworn in. That took place in 1870 from the little town of Georgetown, South Carolina. Robert DeLodge from Aiken was a member. He too had never been enslaved. He was born to free parents. in Aiken. Then, in addition to Ken, Robert Brown Elliott was from Massachusetts. He moved to South Carolina to become a part of what he saw taking place there. A brilliant lawyer, came to South Carolina and became a very prominent member there. And then the fifth one was a guy named Rancia, Alonzo Rancia. He was the first person of color to form professional groups in South Carolina to educate people, the literary societies and all of that. He formed those down in Charleston. And the number 6 in the group was Robert Smalls. Mm-hmm. Number 7 is a man named Miller, mm-hmm. Thomas E. Miller. Thomas E. Miller is a very interesting person in the group, and I'll come back to him in a minute. I got to tell you about George Washington Murray, who became number 8. Murray, I knew about for a long time because there was a folk story in my family floating around about my relationship to George Washington Murray, and I tried hard to get to the bottom of that relationship. And I was pressing an aunt one day, and she looked at me and said, "Now, James, back then, a lot of things happened without the benefit of marriage." And I knew then not to ask the questions anymore, and so I never did. But let me go back to Thomas Miller. He, to me, anybody that's first is going to be important to a lot of people. That was Joseph Rainey. Thomas Miller was born in a little place that's now known as Ridgeland, South Carolina. It was called back then Faribeville. When he was born, out of wedlock, his family gave him up for adoption. He was adopted by an African-American family, but his mother was the daughter of Thomas Heyward, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And when they put him up for adoption, this African-American family adopted him, and they moved to Charleston. And that's how he became African-American. He decided to continue his life throughout as African-American. So anybody that went to South Carolina State College and they ever see the pictures of all the presidents there, they would see this one picture right at the beginning, and they would question, is he really African-American? Well, the fact of the matter is, by choice, he was African-American. So I go through all of these nuances about these people, and then I write in this book about how their decisions impacted the country, how we got the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which is still the strongest Civil Rights Act ever. Most lawyers will tell you that, the 1866 Civil Rights Act. And why that act was so strong, it was simply using contracts to say that every black person had the same rights that a white person had. It didn't go through all these other nuances of stuff that we go through today, just said that. And that made a very strong thing for lawyers to fight these cases with. So that's how this book developed around these people, and I'm sure that people got a question about it. But before you get to any questions, let's talk about Robert Smalls.
That was my next question.
Everybody wants to know about Robert Smalls. Robert Smalls was born enslaved in Beaufort, South Carolina. When he was 12 years old, the interesting thing about Smalls is nobody ever knew. His mother never told who the father was. Everybody always knew that his father was not African American. However, he lived in the house where his mother worked, and he had a relationship with all the children who owned his family. His mother got very concerned that he was not conducting himself as African Americans were expected to conduct. And she thought he was going to get in trouble and thought he would not be safe. So she got the owner to let him go to Charleston and work in Charleston, and all the money he made was sent back to John McGee, who was the owner. Well, he finally got a job around the age of 17 on the waterfront. And when he got that job on the waterfront, he demonstrated leadership skills that allowed the three people running that ship to give him responsibility for the ship. And one day, when these three people had gone into Charleston to spend the Friday evening, as they did very often.
And the war had started.
The war had started. The war was going on. Robert Smalls took the captain's hat and just flopped it on his head and sort of went around the ship mocking the captain. And one of his buddies said to him, he said, you know, when you put that cap on, you look exactly like the captain. And Robert Smalls, a light went off in his head. And he hatched the plan. He knew that these guys would be leaving on Friday evening. And when they left, they would not come back until sometime on Saturday. So he decided how to steal that ship and escape. He learned the currents. He learned the whistles. He knew exactly how to sound the whistles that would allow them safe passage out of the harbor. And he would imitate the captain and get that done. So he told his wife what his plan was, and he told her what the dangers were. And she told him she was ready to meet those dangers.
The dangers were his life was at risk.
His life,
he gets caught, that's it.
It's all over. Well, he did it. And to make a long story short, they successfully navigated that ship. His wife brought along that night a white sheet. And when they got close enough to the Union forces, she raised that white sheet and surrendered that ship.
And they got through 5 Confederate checkpoints.
5 checkpoints, and he got through them because he knew how to sound the whistles. And the last checkpoint, the person, it was at Fort Sumter, and the person said to him, aye, Captain, go blow those Yankees to hell. Mm-hmm. Well, he took the ship to the Yankees. They gave him his freedom and $1,500, enlisted him in the Navy, and he ran that ship.
Commandeered the ship?
Commandeered the ship.
For the Union?
For the Union.
And became a captain?
Became a captain. He was the first African-American to be captain in the Navy. And you won't find that in the history books, but that is what happened.
But that wasn't the end of Robert Smalls. That was just the beginning.
Just the beginning. Robert Smalls, I say, and some of my friends get upset with me. One stopped speaking to me when I said this in the speech. That Robert Smalls is the most consequential South Carolinian who ever lived. Not John C. Calhoun, not Strom Thurmond, Robert Smalls. And I can make that case without any doubt. Here's a guy born enslaved, never got a formal education, yet he became a very wealthy businessman, had the ingenuity to do as he did with that ship. Mm-hmm. And one of the most remarkable battles with that ship took place when they were attacked by the Confederates, who recognized the ship. And there was a big bounty on Smalls's head and a big reward for anybody to capture that ship. Mm-hmm. And so they were under attack. And the captain of the ship got scared wanted to surrender, and Smalls refused to
Told him
surrender.
to beach it. Smalls said, I'm
They told him to beach it. He said, oh, no. He knew he was a dead man. So what Smalls did, he locked the captain up in the pilot house and took over the ship, won the battle, came back, and when the general found out, he fired the captain, made Robert Smalls the captain. That's how he became captain. And he started earning a whole lot of money.
Incredible history. And I said just at the beginning, and I know we could spend all night on Robert Smalls.
Sure.
But I think it's important, too, that you make mention in the book is how he helped recruit 5,000 black soldiers and swung the course of the war for the Union Army.
Yeah, well, he delivered that ship in May of 1862. For some strange reason, Saxton wanted, he knew he was losing the war. They needed more manpower. And so they wanted Abraham Lincoln to allow blacks to serve. And a law had been passed not to allow that. But Lincoln had gotten an amendment made to that law that would allow him on his own fruition to do it. But under pressure, he wouldn't do it. So Robert Smalls was sent to Washington. I want you to get this. He escaped in May. He was sent to Washington in August. In August. Here is this guy. No formal education. Had been enslaved. He is sitting down with Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States, in August of that year. And he was so persuasive, Lincoln allowed him to start recruiting blacks to serve in that war. And Abraham Lincoln made the statement, which you'll find in the book. But for those 40,000, 5,000 started with him. It got up to 40,000. But for those soldiers, they would not have won that war. History would have taken a different course. This is Robert Smalls. Nobody in South Carolina's history can come too close to Robert Smalls. Yes, he is the most consequential South Carolinian who ever lived. I told that in a speech one time, and a friend of mine who was sort of a historian came up to me afterwards. He said, no, I really enjoyed your speech today. He said, I really think that you're right about that. Robert Smalls is the most consequential black South Carolinian who ever lived. And I looked at him and I said, that's not what I said. He looked at me and walked away. That's the last time we ever had a conversation.
Let's switch gears back to the first.
To what?
Back to the first, Joseph Rainey.
Joseph Rainey, from Georgetown. Joseph Rainey's father was a barber. And Rainey's father was allowed to earn extra money cutting hair. When he got enough money, he bought his family's freedom and moved them from Georgetown to Charleston. And there in Charleston, Joseph Rainey learned his father's profession as a barber. Now, you're hearing all this talk about barbershop politics and beauty shop politics. Few people realize the very first African-American who's ever got elected to Congress was himself a barber. So none of this stuff is new. He made a lot of money, and he became very wealthy. And when the war broke out, he was being forced into the Confederate Army, which he did not like doing. He was given 2 jobs to fight for the Confederacy. He got an opportunity to escape, and he and his wife left Charleston, South Carolina, moved to Bermuda, Any of you have ever been to Bermuda, you will know that there's a Barber's Row in Bermuda. It is named for this barber, Joseph Rainey, because he set up shop in Bermuda, where he stayed until the war was over. He took all of his wealth, came back to Charleston, and then moved back to Georgetown, where he started to practice politics and became the first African American ever elected. Now, I want to be sure you realize what I'm saying here. Elected, because there were 2 African American senators down in Mississippi. Back in those days, the senators were not elected. They were appointed by the legislature to represent. So the first one ever elected was Joseph Rainey.
And you being the teacher and the historian that you are, and before you were the first, as you said, there were 8 before you, the first 8. And as the leader that you are in the House of Representatives, you wanted to make sure Joseph Rainey was properly recognized. Tell us what you did.
Yeah, when I got to Congress, I started looking around for stuff. It all started when I was in the governor's office back in the 1970s. John West, who appointed me to his office, was sworn in as governor of South Carolina in January of 1971. And one day, shortly thereafter, he came up to me and he said, Jim Clyburn, he was the first one that started calling me Jim. I never was called Jim until he decided that Jim Clyburn was a thing. And now my wife never knew my first name. She always called me Clyburn. So he said to me, hey, Jim Clyburn, how's everything going? You satisfied here? Because no black person had ever been on the governor's staff before. And I said, Governor, everything's going pretty well with one exception. He says, what is that? I said, I feel kind of lonely around here. I said, I walk through here. Every now and then I see 1 or 2 people who may be working in some capacity. I said, I look at all these walls, and I see these pictures of all these people, famous people, and there's not a single one of an African American. I said, I really think you ought to do something about that. He didn't say anything. He just kind of walked away. A couple of weeks later, he came up to me. He says, you know, I've been thinking about what you said. I'm going to appoint a committee to look into the history and recommend to me an African American to put on these walls. And so he did. A little while later, the committee came back with their report. He asked them to give him 3 people, and they did. And he says, he came to me, he said, the committee sent me these 3 names, one of whom is in this book, and it wasn't Robert Smalls. I knew who the people were. And I said to him, I says, I got a little bit of a problem. He said, well, you select the one. You say, you know them? I don't know them. You select the one. Which one would you pick? I said, I wouldn't pick any of them. He says, well, who would you pick? I said, Mayor McLeod Bethune. That's what Well, he had a little habit he would do. I mean, he didn't know what to do. He did that little thing, but he decided to do it. And when he recommended Mayor McLeod Bethune, all hell broke loose. All these letters written and everything on the news. She was a communist, and she was that, and she was the other. It got so bad. I went into his office one day. I said, Governor, I came in to apologize. He said, for what? I said, well, I've gotten you into a bunch of trouble here. I did not intend and did not anticipate that anything like this would happen. He says, you haven't gotten me in any trouble. We're going to do this. I didn't see how he was going to do it. But Mary McLeod Bethune's portrait was hung on the wall of the state capitol. And today, Mary McLeod Bethune has become the first African American to have her likeness in Statuary Hall in in the United States Capitol. And Florida is the state that sent her up. Each state gets two. Florida decided to make her one of their two. And so that started it.
Let's talk about Alonzo Renzier. And you portray him as someone that reminded you of the late, great John Lewis.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, John Lewis, as all of you know, was probably the most famous member of SNCC. John and I met as 19-year-old college students. He was in school down in Tennessee. I was in school in South Carolina. The second meeting of SNCC took place on Morehouse College's campus in Georgia. And we met the weekend of October 15, when we were having a disagreement with Martin Luther King Jr. on approaches. And we asked King for a meeting. King came to Morehouse that day to meet with us at 10 o'clock in the evening. And he said we had an hour. When we left that room, it was like 3 o'clock the next morning. So for about 5 hours, I was in that room with King. And that's when I had my Saul to Paul transformation. I have never been the same since. I met John that same weekend. That started a lifelong relationship. We had no idea we would ever be serving the United States Congress, at least most serving together. Our offices, his office was right above mine there in the Cannon office building. We talked regularly. And the last, when he got sick and told me that it was terminal, I don't know who he told before, but I never told anybody. And we were so close because he had internalized nonviolence. A lot of us practice nonviolence, but John Lewis is the only one I knew that really internalized nonviolence. If you spat on John, he would turn the other cheek. You spit on Jim Clyburn, it's going to be trouble.
Good trouble, good trouble. He means good trouble.
But Alonzo Renzier, you go through his life, he was pretty much the same way. He was totally different from most of the others. He formed these groups, these literary societies, and he worked through them to effectuate change. He just was not going to fight back. He may have been the only one of the group like that. Now, he is the only one. None of them escaped prison. I mean, they were eventually arrested on trumped-up charges, and no pun intended, but some trumped-up charges. Mm-hmm. I think that is an intended pun. And all of them, including Robert Smalls, were driven out of office. And in every instance, and I think this is important, when they were arrested and they were tried, in every instance, the leading witness against them was another person of color, in every instance.
What struck me in this book was a number of mentions, biblical mentions. You're a man of deep faith, and you talk about how it's driven you in your life, where you come from, your father, And when you had a conversation with your father and how you decided to go in a different direction, and if you could share with us what your father told you, and then how faith has not only instructed you in your work in Congress and in the community across the country, but also how it instructed the first 8.
The entire first 8, you go through that. I talked about Richard Kane, who was a minister here in New York, minister down in South Carolina. Richard Kane, if my research is correct, was the 14th bishop of the AME Church. And a current bishop of the AME Church from New York, Sam Green, is in here somewhere. I saw him earlier. He, though he was a minister, the little town of Lincolnville, I don't know anybody here from South Carolina. Lincolnville is up near Somerville, between Somerville and Charleston. The founder of Lincolnville was Richard Kane. He found that community to establish a community for African Americans so they could have home ownership. Home ownership became his big calling. Yes, he was a minister. He had pastored Emmanuel. He had found Morris Brown AME Church, where I was a member, but he thought that wealth building was just as important as spirituality, and he devoted himself to that. My dad and I always talk about me following him into the ministry, and but I'd always heard my dad say that you had to be called to the ministry. So when I finished high school and went to South Carolina State, we talked about me going there and then going to the seminary. But the whole time I was on that campus, I kept listening for the call. I never heard it. So I went home to tell my dad that I didn't think I was going to go into the ministry. I'm not going to say I wasn't called. I never heard it. And so I thought my dad was going to be very disappointed. Maybe he was. But he said to me on that day, "Well, son, I suspect the world would much rather see a sermon than to hear one." Now, I thought for years that was my dad's brilliance. My dad had enough brilliance to read Edgar Guest, because that was taken from a poem that some of you may have read about Edgar Guest. But I gave my dad credit for that for a long time. But my dad used to tell me all the time, "Son, there's nothing new under the sun." And so that was not new. He got it from Edgar Guest, but it changed my life. We had never discussed my going to seminary again. He blessed my political efforts. He was nervous about what we were doing during the sit-ins. But when he got a little squishy, my mom stepped in. She was never nervous. She was the biggest fundraiser for the NAACP in South Carolina during their lifetime and became the NAACP's first Woman of the Year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
That is the South Carolina branch, chapter of the NAACP. Well, NAACP, I got to know, we're getting away from that double. It is now the NAACP.
In the book, it was incredibly well done and just so informative. And just the history that speaks to our great country, where we've come from, a story, many stories often untold, difficult stories.
Yeah.
It's an emotional book.
Sure.
And, when you're talking about the Deep South and South Carolina's difficult history, the first 8 were extraordinary heroes.
Right.
And following the Civil War, there was a reset in the country, Reconstruction. And that lasted for about 10 years.
A little more than 10. It all depends on whose definition you use. Some people, very learned people, they take this history of Reconstruction all the way down to the turn of the century. I think that's unfair. I don't think that's the way it ought to be characterized, because here is the deal. Reconstruction came to an end when all of the troops were taken out of the South in April of 1877. A deal struck with Rutherford B. Hayes. And I think
a betrayal.
They were betrayed. Samuel Tilden from New York, running for president. Samuel Tilden got 184 electoral votes running for president. At the time, you needed 185. He got 184. Rutherford B. Hayes from Ohio got 165. So Hayes was 20 votes short. And the reason this discrepancy was there, because 3 states, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana, fighting over slavery, sent 2 sets of electors to Washington, one pro-slavery, one anti-slavery. Those 20 electoral votes were in dispute. So the House of Representatives didn't know what to do. They appointed a 15-member committee to study the issue, to meet with the candidates, and make a recommendation to the House. The committee voted, after meeting with the 2 candidates, 8-7 by 1 vote, to give those 20 votes to Hayes, because Hayes promised them, remember now, this is Florida, South Carolina, Louisiana. Give me these 20 votes, I will become president, I'll bring an end to Reconstruction. Now, I wasn't in the room, so I can't tell you that's exactly what they said. But I can tell you this, that's what he did. They gave him the 20 votes. By the way, Hayes was a Republican. All 8 of these people were Republicans. Hayes double-crossed them. And he brought an end to Reconstruction. This deal was struck in March, and 1 month later, he brought an end to Reconstruction. So remember, if you don't remember anything else I've said here tonight, remember the power of 1 vote. 8-7, they brought Reconstruction to an end. 185-184 started Jim Crow. And Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln and tried to undo everything Abraham Lincoln did, got impeached, the first president to be impeached. And when they sent the impeachment to the Senate failed to convict him by 1 vote. These 3 1 votes changed our nation's history for the worse.
And from that moment on, there was in many ways a slow unraveling, and in other ways, if not more ways, a rapid unraveling of all the successes.
All the successes.
And so very rapidly, by the end of the 1890s, how many members of the South Carolina House of Representatives were black?
0. 0 in the last one in South Carolina left technically. There's a little technicality in this. A guy named Bolt from Georgetown. He left in 1901. And the next black person was elected to the state legislature in 1970. 69 years later. George Washington Murray left Congress in 1897, and the next black elected to Congress from South Carolina, though for the vast majority of that time, African Americans were a majority in South Carolina, was yours truly in 1992. So the 95 years between number 8 and number 9.
And they used every way possible to suppress the vote. Violence, they used the law against the people by gerrymandering, by cutting off people's ability to even to vote. Talk about the voter registration among blacks in South Carolina versus proportionally the population.
Sure. Look at Alabama. When John Lewis came across Edmund Pettus Bridge, Alabama was a majority black, but only 3% of African Americans in Alabama were registered to vote. Only 3%. You're talking about 1965. What we have to really come to grips with is that all of these shenanigans that were being used back then are now coming back into this process.
Exactly right.
This redistricting that's taking place. That's when people talk about, oh, that's behind us. The fact of the matter is, it's really in front of us. Yes, and we have got to be very, very vigilant. Yes. And that's why I changed the direction of the book. I was going in another direction. It's going to be purely a history book. But I said, oh, no, there are too many parallels here. Back then, when they were fighting to keep African Americans from registering to vote, they were all instructed to wear red shirts. Whenever they were about the business, they wore red shirts. Today, red caps. You can go through this book, and there are parallels to everything you see today. In fact, the biggest massacre to take place in South Carolina, a little place called Hamburg down there, North Augusta, South Carolina, and that massacre was perpetrated utilizing the National Guard.
In all of these instances, one after another, was to suppress the vote.
To suppress the vote.
To suppress the people.
That's right. And deny education. Robert Smalls, if you look at these people, were not only were they different, in some instances they didn't particularly like each other. I'll give you one good example. DeLarge. DeLarge had a very prickly personality. He got on everybody's nerves. DeLarge and Robert Brown Elliott went after it. Robert Brown Elliott was erudite, very smart lawyer. Now, DeLarge was pretty wealthy because his family his father was a tailor, his mother a dressmaker, and they made a lot of money. In fact, one of his problems was his family owned slaves. And so the guys didn't like him too well. But when he got in trouble and they were trying to steal the election from him, that same Robert Brown Elliott defended him in his legal pursuits. To me, knowing that about people like Elliott, it's a big lesson to me. What they were doing had a racial connotation that was adverse. Robert Brown Elliott was not going to sit around and allow that to take place, though he did not like DeLarge at all.
Let's talk about, and because we're going to be tight on time, I'm going to take a couple of questions from the crowd in a minute, but I want you to talk about how the HBCUs came around in the
1890?
Yeah.
Oh, the HBCUs?
Yes, sir.
Well, all the HBCUs were basically church supported. The first private HBCU was because Cheney State was the first up in Pennsylvania. Remember now, that's Pennsylvania. Back then, Pennsylvania would never think of doing some of the stuff we've seen them do recently. They were very proactive in educating African Americans and providing those freedoms to African Americans. In fact, Robert Smalls spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania when he took the ship up there to have it fixed. But the HBCU started, first one being Cheney. The first private one was Wilberforce, sponsored by the AME Church. In South Carolina, we have 8 HBCUs in South Carolina. Only 1 is public. Allen is AME, Benedict and Mars, both Baptists. Voorhees is Episcopal. Claflin is United Methodist. Clinton College is the AME Zion. So these churches were how you got education. In South Carolina State did not exist. And when they created the land-grant schools in 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed that bill. These schools were supposed to train people in agriculture and mechanics. Florida, A&M, agriculture and mechanics. South Carolina State, it was state A&M. Now, North Carolina A&T, agriculture and technical. That's what these schools were supposed to do. But they were denied. Clemson was the land-grant school for South Carolina. And Clemson was found by a family, Thomas Clemson, who's the son-in-law of John C. Calhoun. And when he left his will, it was to build the school for whites only. So the state honored that. And so when the land grants money came, they gave that money to Claflin rather than setting up a school. A lot of people ask today, why is it that South Carolina State is next door to Claflin? That is because in 1890, when they created the second land grant school, you had to establish these schools in the former slave states. If you didn't allow them to go to the white school, you had to establish a black school for them, and that's how South Carolina State got established. And old Thomas E. Miller was in Congress at the time that bill passed, and he got unelected in 1892, but he worked a deal to become South Carolina State's first president. So that's how Miller got to be president of South Carolina State.
One of the first 8, the first president of the South Carolina State.
He was one of the first 8,
University.
But he was not African American.
So from the crowd, what can we learn from leadership as demonstrated by 19th century legislative leaders in today's political climate?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, and I put this in the close of my memoir, in the epilogue, I wrote it as a letter, an open letter to my children and grandchildren. And I talk about this throughout this book. The first thing I think people have to learn that politics is nothing more than relationships. And you have to think about what will it take to have a positive, a fruitful relationship. The last thing that contributes to a fruitful relationship is insult. And I've not been able to understand why people think you're scoring political points by insulting. You know, people deserve being treated with dignity and respect. Mm-hmm. So I said in that letter, open letter to my children, If you're thinking about going into business, get to know the people you want to sell your products or your service to. And if you're thinking about going into politics, get to know the people you want to vote for you. I think the biggest mistake we make in this business is trying to get people to understand you. If you spend your time understanding them and helping them fulfill their dreams and their aspirations, they will repay you handsomely.
It's all about the people.
It's all about the people.
That's right.
So you keep the focus on them, not yourself.
Yes.
Keep the focus on them. It can come out all right for you. If you spend all your time with the focus on you, it ain't going to be good in the end. That's why I have great hope, not just because of my state's motto, while I breathe, I hope. It's South Carolina's motto, but as I said to a group the other day, it was Monday of last week, I was on a program in South Carolina with Secretary Bessett, Secretary of the Treasury, who is my constituent. He lives in my congressional district. I was teasing him about that. But when I got up to speak, I told the group that while I breathe, I hope is South Carolina's best known motto. But South Carolina has a second motto: prepared in mind and resources. Now I want you to think about that. Prepared in mind and resources. That is how I spend my time, not just hoping. Because if you just spend your time hoping, you're going to be hopeless. You got to prepare mind
That's right.
and resources. So I don't know if South Carolina planned it that way, but I use those two mottos when I interact with young people. I tell them all the time, get prepared in mind and resources. It's good to hope, but he who only hope is hopeless.
Just like faith without works.
Yeah, I know a bunch of preachers here, and I didn't want to get into that.
Call to action, though.
Because you stood there and watched Emmanuel Cleaver accuse me of being a jackleg preacher. But, you know, very seldom do I give a speech, very seldom do I write an op-ed piece, but I don't find a way to ground it in biblical teachings. And I don't camp out only in the, you know, there's a part of this book that you pointed out to me that you were drawn to when I talk about Matthew 25. People talk, well, I'm a Matthew 25 Christian, and they rush right down to verses 40 and 45, in as much as you've done it for the least of these. But you know, if you look back up in the verses before you get down to 40, there's some other teachings in there. And one that you were drawn to is those verses that deal with using your talents. Everybody has got a role to play. I don't care who you are. You can find a way to contribute to making the country better, making your community better, making somebody's life a little bit better. Just use your resources. If you don't use your talents according to the biblical teachings, you might just lose it. And so I focus on that. I focus on what the parable of the Good Samaritan is all about. It teaches us that it's not just about church membership. I mean, the people who were the church affiliates left a dying man on the side of the road. It was a stranger, a man of different ethnicity, who stopped and gave him the help he needed. He was riding on his donkey. He got down off his donkey to attend to this man. And there's a 3-letter word for a donkey that your men need to get off of to take care of the needy. I'm not going to say the word.
So the first 8, they were inspirational, they were heroic, they persevered. And that word kept coming to me as I read the book. And everything that they went through, they persevered.
Absolutely.
And, you talk with such humility on a regular basis, but in the book and how you characterize your place in the world as it compares to the first 8.
Sure.
And the connective tissue between you and them. I believe the first 8 are very proud of you, looking down on you right now. What do you think, everybody?
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, what you've accomplished and where you've come from, you never forgot where you come from, never forgot what you've gone through. You articulated beautifully, your family, your parents, your wife, your children. And I just think it's a demonstration of your wonderful character, but it's how you've led. And
well, I'll say this to help you with this. My dad used to say to me all the time, son, if you're going to lead, remember, you do so by precept and example. Mm-hmm. He used to say that all the time. No matter what precept you laid out, you got to be an example if you are going to lead. And so I have tried very hard to make sure that whatever I suggest, not just ask for someone to do, that I find a way to show that I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important because people emulate. I've got this young man sitting out here, not so young anymore, came into my life, Ralph Dawson is around here somewhere, as a 10th grader. I don't come to New York when I don't see him. He would not allow me to come to New York. In fact, he knows when I'm coming before. My chief of staff is in here. He came into my life when I didn't even know it. My wife ended up hiring him without my knowledge to be. He came on to be my general counsel. He's been my chief of staff for the entire all but 8 months that I've been in the Congress. He grew up with my daughter, Mignon, who is in here. I just try to be an example for all of them. My cousin, William, he goes around with me all the time. I don't know who's paying him. But, sometimes he calls me and he says, I'm gonna be meeting you in Boston, as he was a couple of weeks ago. And he came down to, got on the plane with me and went with me to Boston. He's traveled with me in Virginia and New Jersey throughout these last elections, simply because I try very hard to be an example for them, and I do that with everybody that I know. Because if you don't, what you see happening around us today, we have the benefit of this history. Mm-hmm. They did not have a history to live by or to be on guard for. We've got it. So let's not sit by and let this happen. There are forces at work throughout this country who are trying to whitewash history. Mm-hmm. I mean, why? What is it about taking Jackie Robinson's name out of the annals?
Shameful.
What, the Tuskegee Airmen, what does it contribute to the future of this country? Removing their contributions from the Smithsonian. That is what is happening. And we should adhere to what George Santayana said to us. If we fail to learn the lessons of history, we're bound to repeat them. I don't think we need to repeat what these people went through. They've left lessons for us. I've tried to put them in this book. And I know that, one reason I'm so endeared to the young man I just mentioned, when I was teaching him history, I didn't teach from the books those people gave me. I had to take the books, and the book was a reference book. But I taught them from the evening news and the morning newspapers. And I got them to understand what you saw last night on the news is grounded in this historical fact. And I'll show it to them in the book. But they got to know that you are living this. You can't let this happen again. There were just things that I did, and it stays with people. I keep relationship with students that would be very interesting to you. I hear from students all the time that I had when they were in 8th grade. Yeah.
Well,
they're surprised I'm still living, but.
Well, you just celebrated the 46th
anniversary of my 39th birthday.
What do you think? Impressive, huh? Impressive?
Yeah.
Man.
Appreciate you.
You're the man. I just want to say, I've got a new favorite book. And every man, woman, and child in this country should read this book and get to know their history. I know my children are going to read this book, my wife, my family. I'm excited for them to read it because there's so much that you've put into this extraordinary masterpiece.
Thank you.
That people should know. It's South Carolina history. It's Black history. It's American history. It's all of our history.
Thank you.
And if you don't know it, you should.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for you to be my friend, to be able to call you my friend. It's an honor. I'm thrilled that I had this opportunity to join you here tonight on a whim. I'm thankful for my wife that drove the first couple hours down here today so I could finish the book.
Thank you.
And our nation thanks you for being who you are and what you've done for all of us. For all of us. Just a wonderful human being, an extraordinary leader, and a great American.
Thank you.
And, today I also want to recognize that it's Veterans Day, 11/11. Thank you to all of our veterans that are here. Thanks to all the veterans that have served. And when you think about those that have served our country, you think about Robert Smalls.
If this is the closing, let me close by saying this. This is Veterans Day. Robert Smalls was the only genuine hero of the Civil War. It was that Civil War that gave birth to what we now call Memorial Day. The Memorial Day used to be called Decoration Day, and it started with the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the 55th, when they gathered in Charleston to celebrate all of those people, people of color, who had died fighting that war to keep this country as one. And they decorated their graves, and they met to do that annually. And eventually, it became Memorial Day, and the Congress passed a law establishing Memorial Day on the day that we have it today. But the first Memorial Day was started by the people in this book and the folks that they interacted with in Charleston, South Carolina. That's where it all started.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations on Again, I'm calling it a masterpiece. Wait till you get your hands on it and read it. You won't want to put it down.
Thank you.
You know what I was thinking about today? I was thinking about reading it again. I'm not kidding. There's so much information in here.
I appreciate
There's so much detail that everybody should know this. So God bless you.
Thank you.
And have a wonderful night, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.